Hello again everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome to this video. So today we are taking a quick look at the RX550 4GB Asus OC Evo whatever. Basically the Asus version of the RX550, and basically we're just going to have a quick look and see whether this card is viable for gaming in 2022 and if you should consider it if you're a budget gamer. If you need something that will play games, perhaps even at HD, and will run all, if not most, titles, uh, and just something that you can do some light gaming with. You're not gonna turn up the settings to max or anything like that with this card, but you might be able to just crank out a few frames and keep those temperatures low within the right setup. So let's take a quick look and see how the card does and whether you should consider it for a budget gaming setup in 2022. Let's get into it. Okay, welcome to the testing. For this first test, I decided I'm going to put everything on the lowest setting, but put the resolution on HD 1K 1920 by 1080, and just see how that goes. So my idea for the testing methodology is to do just that, where I'll put the resolution at the highest with the lowest settings, and then for the second test I'll put the resolution at 720p with the lowest possible settings. So this is the first test, which is HD with the lowest settings. So as you can see there, right now it's getting a 45 FPS right around there, which is not great for the lowest settings, but considering we're playing at HD, it's not actually that bad. Because this is quite a demanding scene as well. A scene like this will be one of the most difficult scenes to render because of all the people. Moving on to the jungle scene now, which probably will be a little bit easier to render. And as you can see, the graphics, not that good because of the low settings, but it's quite crisp because of the higher resolution. And still running at above 40 FPS, so definitely playable, at HD if you're willing to turn down the settings. And this will translate to other games as well. I mean, if it's playable in Tomb Raider at HD, it'll definitely be playable in games like Fortnite, Valorant, CSGO, and I'd wager you could even play a bit of Warzone with this. Probably also at around 40 FPS, but if you're willing to turn down the resolution, maybe you can have a 60 FPS Warzone gaming experience. But don't quote me on that. Moving on to a scene with lots of LODs now. The frame rate is always higher in this scene, but as the scene goes on, it gets lower and lower. So right now we're in the mid 60s, looking pretty good. GPU temperature has been pegged around 60 for most of the test, using around 3 gigs of video memory. This is a 4 gig card, and CPU is nice and cool because of that nice Mugen B cooler that we have in here. And the RAM is pegged around 7 gigs. This PC has 16 gigs of RAM. So the rest of this PC is maybe a little bit overkill for this graphics card, but in this scenario, this is just about testing the graphics card. This is it's got a Core i3 8100 CPU and 16 gigs of DDR4 3200 MHz RAM. And right now it's again not dropped below 40 yet, so I think this is just going to be pegged at that 40 to 50 sweet spot at HD. But I'm pretty curious to see what it's going to do at 720p. I think it'll be interesting to see the result for that. So let's switch the graphics to medium. We'll put the anisotropic filtering to 16, and we will lower the resolution to 720p. And let's see how it does. And see how it does at 720p in Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Visually, this game is, you know, a good-looking game when you can get the settings to match. So, you know, this is a good. This card will play esports titles, but that's not really the challenge. Okay, so at medium settings, we're right around that same 40 FPS mark now, playing at 720p, which is interesting. So you can choose to either have a higher resolution or have a bit of in-game settings cranked up on this RX550 4GB card. So the thing about this card is, because of the 4GB memory size, it's able to handle a bit more texture resolutions, and it's a bit more. If this were a 2GB card, I don't think we could have run this game well at all. But because it's the 4GB variant, we are still able to do some light gaming with it. So the FPS is very similar to what it was at HD. Right around that 40 mark still. Not really going too far below 40. GPU is still pegged around 60 degrees Celsius, 90% utilization in this case. Naturally, there will be a bit of a GPU bottleneck in this, because the CPU outperforms the GPU quite a bit. GPU is pegged around 100% utilization, going from 95 to 100. Getting around 70 FPS now. CPU still hasn't heated up much yet, only around 30, it goes from 33 to 37 degrees Celsius. Yeah, to be honest, I think this is a better gaming experience than I would have thought you could get with the RX550, because it's quite a cheap card. I mean, it's one of the cheapest 4GB cards that you can buy. And in terms of performance, look, you're not gonna get much, but for the price point, you know, I'd say this is quite a bit better than a 1030. So maybe somewhere between a 1030 and a 1050. But yeah, the like I said, the nice thing with this is that 4GB memory size. Still getting around 40 to 50 FPS, so you know it goes from 35 to 50 FPS for this benchmark. Let's look at the end results and just see those averages as well. Yeah, so average FPS 43. This is at 720p, so yeah, it depends on what you need. If you want to have the resolution higher, then you have to turn the settings down lower. But if you want the resolution lower, you can turn the settings higher a little bit. Okay, so that's it for this Tomb Raider test. Let's move on to the Far Cry New Dawn test. Okay, loading into the Far Cry New Dawn test benchmark now, and this one is a quick benchmark, as you've seen in the previous videos, so I won't talk too much over it. But this first one we are running at HD, and let's see how it does. Getting around 35 FPS right now, a little bit low. This is at low settings, by the way. So the point of this test is to see if this game is actually playable at HD on a RX550 4GB. Right now I'd say it's playable, but it's not going to be the most pleasant experience. Yeah, still around that 30 FPS mark there. Average of 33. This is a little bit low to play on. Okay, so minimum of 27, that's pretty good in terms of the scale of the rest of them, of the rest of the metrics. The average is 32, which is low. It's not really playable, I wouldn't say. You would aim for anywhere between 40 to 50 FPS to call it really playable, and a maximum of 40. So that's a bit low. Let's see how it does when we actually put it on 720p, and then we turn the settings up a little bit. Okay, so let's turn down the resolution to 720p. Let's apply that. And we will turn the quality up to, let's do normal. Okay, let's just do normal. I think that's fine. Let's see how it goes. That's looking a lot better already. So we are now at 720p normal settings, getting around 55 average FPS, I would say. And this is definitely a lot more playable. And to be honest, it doesn't look way worse. The other thing with AMD cards is the fidelity stuff and the scaling technology that games have nowadays. So it's very difficult to find a card that you can't actually play on, considering, given that it's quite new, maybe bought within the last 5 years or so. But this version of the test is doing a lot better. Hasn't really dropped below 40 yet, I don't think, so definitely playable. 54 average, 53 now. Temperatures are looking good as well. GPU at around 50 and CPU at around 40. So there you have it. 52 average FPS, normal settings, 720p on Far Cry New Dawn. Definitely a playable experience. Let's move on to one last test. Okay, getting into the Red Dead Redemption 2 benchmark now. Running at full HD at the absolute lowest settings possible. So, higher resolution, but lowest settings in terms of textures and anything like ambient occlusion, screen space reflections, everything turned off. Fur turned to medium because that's as low as it goes. And yeah, resolution at 1920 by 1080. So seems like the GPU is around 50 degrees Celsius. Not too bad. It's pretty good actually. CPU is around 30 again. Really not bad. RAM utilization is around 8 gigs of RAM. Again, this is a 16 gig system, so that's fine. And memory utilization on the GPU is only around 2 gigs. So theoretically, you could turn the textures, texture detail and texture sizes up a little bit, and it shouldn't really affect the frame rate too much because we have that little bit of bandwidth left in terms of the memory. But yeah, getting right around 38 FPS now in these more open scenes. But so far, this has been close to a playable experience, but not quite there. Let's see how it does in the more intimate tests where there's actual humans and things. So this is the town of Valentine, I think, getting around 40 FPS, not too bad. These nighttime scenes are a bit difficult to see on the camera, apologies for that. But yeah, still getting around 40 FPS. GPU and CPU temperatures haven't really moved much, um, but the side panel is off of the chassis as well, so it will be a little bit colder. So this is more of an in-game scene, and we seem to be getting around 35 FPS, a little bit low. I want to aim for that 40 mark at least. Yeah, this is pegged right around 35 FPS, so not really playable at HD on low settings. Yeah, seems to be just staying around that 30 to 35 range of FPS right now. GPU is getting a little bit hotter, almost reaching the 60 degrees mark, and the CPU is just keeping its temperature nice and cool, around 30 to 40. So again, this isn't really playable at this stage. It's a little bit low. It'll be interesting to see what that 720p resolution does when we turn up some of the settings a little bit. This is obviously a notoriously difficult game to run and run well, especially on lower end hardware. Yeah, just staying around that 30 FPS mark. Um, CPU and GPU have both heated up a little bit, but still not bad temperatures. Yeah, so I would say this is not playable at HD, to be honest. Let's see how it does at 720p. Okay, getting back into the benchmark for Red Dead Redemption 2. So we lowered the resolution down to 720p and set the graphical settings to medium for everything that could go medium, and switched on some things like uh, reflections and ambient occlusion and volumetric lighting, things like that. So the frame rate seems to be pretty much the same, to be honest. Um, Still not what you would call playable. Right now it's like at around 40, but this is quite a light scene. I think when we get into the towns and things, it'll be around 30 again, as it was in the previous test. So yeah, Red Dead Redemption 2 is a bit of a tough sell. I would argue that if you turn everything on to the lowest at 720p, you could get maybe around 40 to 50 stable. So you could have a playable experience, but it's not going to look good, to be honest. And I'm not sure how fun it's going to be because it looks quite blurry at this resolution at 720p, and yeah, obviously at the lowest settings, it's not the best looking thing. Um, but right now we're getting around 50 with the settings turned to medium. Um, Using around 3 gigs of the 4 gig memory that we have because those texture resolutions are turned up a bit, and using around 8.5 gigs of RAM. CPU seems to be at 35 to 40 degrees Celsius. GPU is around 50 degrees Celsius. So those temperatures are still really good. Not having an issue with those at all. And yeah, so this does seem to be running at above 40. So maybe this would be playable at this resolution with these medium settings, because this doesn't look half bad. It's a bit blurry, but because of the higher resolution details and things, it actually doesn't look that bad. Um, I would say this would be similar to a PlayStation 4 experience if you're playing this game in terms of visuals and in terms of resolution. Um, but obviously at a much cheaper price because this card isn't very expensive if you can get it second hand. Um, yeah, just not really dropping below that 40-degree mark, which is, I mean, 40 FPS mark, which is quite surprising to be honest, because I thought it was gonna just go to like the 30s quite easily. It's in the 30s now, but it's like high 30s. GPU is getting warmer. GPU's nearly reached 60 degrees, which is still very low, and it's been at around 100% utilization for most of the tests. So the GPU is working hard to maintain this 40 FPS frame rate. But yeah, I would have to call this playable, and it doesn't look too bad. So if you are willing to drop down the resolution, um, this is definitely a playable experience. Yeah, just staying around that 40 mark now. Pretty stable, to be honest. Yeah, this has actually surprised me because it definitely is playable, and it doesn't look that bad with this setup. So to be honest, you could play Red Dead Redemption 2 on an RX550 4GB, which surprised me. But there you have it. Apparently, it's doable, and you could lower the settings even more and have a even better, uh, time with it. So definitely playable. Let's talk about it. Okay, so let's talk about the results with the RX 550 4GB Asus OC um, Evo graphics card. So I don't know what this card is going to cost you new. I don't even know if they sell it now, but the card definitely surprised me. Um, this is it's a two slot card. It's not massive. It looks decent. It doesn't have a backplate, but at least it's black, so it will fit with most aesthetics that people want to build. It's got a 4 gig um, memory size, which is quite nice for a cheaper card. If you look at the inputs, you'll see that it has one of each. So it has one DVI, one HDMI, and one display port. So basically, what it comes down to is what you want to do with it and at what resolution you want to do it. I cannot recommend this as a HD gaming card. Um, it will work for some titles, and you will definitely be able to play HD games like esports titles like Rocket League, CS:GO, Valorant, you know, um, games like those that are not graphically as demanding, but that people tend to play a lot because of the competitive nature. So yeah, so it basically comes down to a compromise where you have to decide: do you want to play at HD with low graphics, or do you want to play at 720p, basically HD ready, but with medium graphics? Um, or if you're just a casual gamer that just wants to play some, esports titles, like I said, then you can definitely go for this. If you have a small budget, this is an option because it will play games. It's just not going to max them out or anything like that. So, do I recommend it? Um, Personally, I wouldn't say yes because when it comes to gaming, I'm used to a more high-end setup. But for someone that's just starting out or someone that has a smaller budget but wants to experience video games, this is not a bad option. And like I said, it will play games. Um, the 4 gig 4 gig memory size is nice to have because it helps you with a bit of it gives you a few more options in terms of settings, so you can play around with it a little bit. And a system like this one here is a little bit overkill for this card. you could build a entry-level i3 system, or maybe a Ryzen 3 system with around 8 gigs of RAM, and you would be able to play most games. So that's about it. In terms of would I recommend it, yes and no, depends on your needs, but will it play games? It definitely will. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Like and subscribe, and let me know if you have any suggestions or any ideas for new videos or improvements to the videos that I make now. Like I've been saying, I'm still new to this and my setup isn't that great, but over time it will become better as the channel grows. Thank you for your support, and I hope to see you in the next one.